Welcome back to the Eternal Ruins. There are many paths that a wanderer may choose to walk as we explore this world. From the moment we break free from stone, we are given few choices. We do not decide where we awaken or under what circumstances, but are instead left to these ruins, defenseless and alone. Everything we own is given to us by this place, when and how it chooses. One of the only decisions we truly make is the path we choose to walk. Every time the bells herald a new dawn, each wanderer is given choices that will slowly guide us towards who it is we want to be. Over time, we each end up quite different from how we began, changed by the path we walk. In this entry, I will speak of the wanderers I have met on my journeys, and the unique paths they have chosen to follow. It is worth mentioning, lest these accounts portray a different picture, that such encounters are rare. A wanderer can walk many bells without seeing another face, and when we do, fear can take hold. It is hard, after all, to know what a stranger will do, and I myself have sometimes trusted my gut and stayed hidden instead. These stories of interesting wanderers have been collected over many bells and many steps across these vast ruins. The hallway that I traversed felt like it would never end, and I had resigned myself to the drudgery, one foot after the next. Then I heard the music. Delicate harp sounds resonated along the walls, and I found myself fascinated, hurrying towards them. Only at spirit shrines can I recall hearing such spectacular playing, where routine and ritual gives a wanderer a skilled hand. The music emanated from a crack in the wall, hidden away by leaf and branch. I brushed them aside and discovered that there was no spirit shrine here. Instead, I emerged into a small, secluded chamber filled with rows of sleeping statues. Before them all stood a fair-haired wanderer in a fine blue cloak, plucking the strings of a lyre. At the far end of the room were stone doors, held tightly shut with layers of moss and ivy. She played with her eyes closed, completely lost in the peace of the song. I let myself drift into the melody and watched the rows of statues staring blankly down at her. The tune ebbed and flowed as her fingers danced across the strings, and it reminded me of older times, like the sweetness of memory, of friends long departed, paths never walked. When the last few notes faded into silence, the ground rumbled, and the sealed stone doors shuddered open. The wanderer opened her eyes as if awakening from a dream, and gave a small bow to the rows of statues, then smiled at me with lazy surprise. "Nice to meet you. Did you enjoy my performance?" I learned that her name was Apprentice Graham. Apparently, an apprentice is similar to a spirit warden, someone who learns from someone else. She was taught to play by a traveling spirit named Pelu, who knows many secrets in the ways of music. Graham was sent away to explore the ruins and find the sound of it, only able to reunite with her master once she had learned this lesson. We passed through the open doorway and wandered the ruins together. Graham was peculiar and intensely interesting. She felt the world around her more intensely than most, and responded with song and story. In some ways, she was almost distracted by the beauty of everything that others failed to see. Once, as we struggled up a steep staircase, Graham stopped without saying anything to take in the view. I almost sent us both toppling over the edge of the stairs. I looked down and was struck by the light glittering off the winding walkways and sundered spires, forming a complex mosaic of shapes and color. A flock of birds drifted through a tunnel of archways, playing in the breeze. Seized by inspiration, Graham produced a small drum and a brass horn from her bag. I squirmed as she handed me the drum and insisted that I'd never played. Without speaking, she showed me a basic rhythm and nodded happily as I took over. Standing there on the edge of the stairs, the wind blowing her hair and cloak, she let out a sonorous cry of the horn. At first I was focused only on maintaining the rhythm, but soon I could no longer tell where I ended and the music began. The song, I think, was about courage. The courage of the present moment, to be so radiant despite its brief life, to burn brightly and then disappear back to nothingness. Graham's horn danced around the drumbeat and showed me the way. When we finally made to part ways, I asked the question that had been turning around in my mind as we walked. Why were you playing music for the sleeping statues? They can't hear anything. She smiled dreamily and thought for a moment. It's a little experiment, I suppose. Who is to say whether or not those sleeping within can hear my songs? Perhaps one day, when they walk these halls, deep down they'll remember, and it could bring them peace. The vestiges of the collapsed bridge lurched and groaned under my weight. A sliver of stone connected the two sides of the deep chasm, a perilous thread holding them together. My trembling feet shuffled across the cracked stone, and I tried not to look down into the depths below. All that is to say, when I finally made it across, I had let my guard down. The stone scale must have been stalking me across the broken bridge the entire time, its scales perfectly camouflaged among the wreckage. Their patience is outstanding, waiting in stillness until their prey is unaware and helpless. As I took my last steps across the vertiginous chasm, relief washed over me. The stone scale chose this moment to strike. A loud clang, and I was knocked down hard. I wheezed and turned to look up. A wanderer clad in green stood between me and the lizard, sword and shield drawn. The stone scale, as large as a wanderer, struggled against the shield. Its fangs dripped with venom. My defender gave a cry and shoved. The stone scale flipped backwards in a clean arc, and the wanderer lunged with her sword, a masterful stroke. A hissing roar echoed around the chasm, and its severed tail fell limp to the ground. Everything went quiet. Wind whistled through the valley of stone, rustling the wanderer's wild, dark hair. She stood rigid between me and the beast, waiting. The stone scale took a hesitant step forward, and then faltered. Dark blood oozed from its wound. It leapt fluidly over the side of the bridge and landed on the wall of the chasm, scampering away. My savior didn't hesitate to draw a bow from her back. She released a hissing arrow that dove over the edge and found its target. The stone scale froze for a moment and then fell from the wall, tumbling into darkness. I was still in the grips of shock as I stammered my thanks. The wanderer offered me a hand, pulling me up with ease. "Are you trying to get yourself killed?" she asked sternly. Then she grinned. "Good thing I was here to save you. My name is Bastian Reno." Reno wore layers of servitor carapace as armor, and stood a head taller than me. Her green eyes squinted at the chasm around us. "We'd best leave. It doesn't feel safe here." Reno led us to a jutting platform overlooking a large expanse of the ruins. She had lugged along the stone scale's tail and cooked it whole over a great fire. I turned queasy as she carved off a sliver for me and was chided for poking at it. To my surprise, it was quite edible, and I ended up going back for more. The day's exertions fell on me suddenly, and I sat dazed by the crackling fire. Rena cleaned her armor and weapons with sharp precision. She dragged a peculiar stone along her blade, honing the edge. My eyes followed the stone, back and forth, until I could keep them open no longer. When I woke, Rena was sat watchfully on the edge of the balcony, the dawn light warming her face. Perhaps she didn't need sleep like the rest of us. My senses returned. I thanked her profusely for saving my life. That was the only time I ever saw her cringe away. She changed the topic, and I learned that she was in search of a relic. A weapon, she said brusquely. A blade that can cut through darkness itself. My eyes widened for a moment. Rena looked carved from stone. A hero from another time. A time without fear. I knew then that she would climb into the very depths of despair if it meant protecting others. Eventually, many bells and many adventures later, our paths called us in different directions. Basti and Rena handed me what looked like a small chip of rock. Confused, I looked closer. It was a stone scale. Her eyes shone fiercely, and she said, "Be brave, wanderer." The raised obelisk stood at the center of the large plaza, a monument whose meaning had been lost to the ages. A blanket of colorful flowers covered the scene, bursting from the moss and stone. The petals waved gently in the breeze. Vash Many Steps sat at the foot of the obelisk, legs crossed and eyes closed. His name was whispered around many a campfire, the wanderer who walked in the spirit world, and I had sought after him for many bells. I cleared my throat as I approached, and he peeked at me with one eye. "Nope, sorry, just a moment. Almost there." I watched him while I waited. Vash had a laid-back smile on his face, an aloof serenity that hung in the air around him. His robes were somehow more vibrant than the flowers, and the quality of the stitching hinted at spiritual involvement in its creation. Markings covered his arm, a fine script that I later discovered were promises. A bashful sprite peeked out from behind him, curious of me. Vash sighed and opened his eyes. He seemed completely unsurprised by my presence. "My name's Vash. Vash Many Steps. How can I help?" I introduced myself and asked what he'd been doing beside the monument. Carrying messages for spirits, he told me, was difficult work. Memorizing some of the longer passages required meditation to hold it all in there. After much pestering, Vash finally agreed to let me accompany him as he journeyed to the shrine of the great spirit Ronama. I wanted to learn more about this storied wanderer. He kept a quick pace. Clearly those stout-heeled boots had carried him unimaginable steps. The small sprite sat on his shoulder during the journey, something I had never seen before. An awe arose in me the more we traveled together. Vash filled the quiet bells with interesting secrets I had never heard before, namely rumors about spirits. There were two great spirits who were once friends, but now they hated each other. Or that there's a minor spirit who can only be found wandering the darkest places of the ruins. He let these slip as if everyone knew them. Any spirit I mentioned, he seemed to have already met, often multiple times. After many bells, we arrived at Ronama's shrine. The three massive towers formed a triangle, with the great spirit's inner chamber at their center. 40 spirit wardens greeted us, recognizing Vash at once, and we were granted immediate entry. I turned timid at the splendor of the shrine and the warden's clean white robes. Vash just yawned as he was ushered to meet with Ronama of the Three Wisdoms. "Sorry, I gotta do this one alone. I won't be long." He handed me his sprite companion and passed through the great doorway alone. We wandered around the opulent shrine, ignoring the harsh gaze of the wardens. I sat against a shining pillar and wrote in my journal as the sprite played around me, at home in the shrine. After a time, Vash found me there, his business with the Great Spirit finished. The sprite beckoned to him, and he crouched next to it, placing a hand on its head. No, we can't stay. There's always another message to carry. The longer we traveled together, the more restless Vash became. Relief lit his face when I eventually told him that I would be leaving on my own way. His goodbyes were casual and brief, as if we'd be seeing each other again soon. I watched as he walked away. His little sprite friend sat on his shoulder. It turned and waved back to me, and they disappeared from view.